Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please as we move into a very serious part of our program now. It's time for the In Memoriam segment. As you know, as each year passes, sadly, we lose a number of names that have contributed so much to the music industry and particularly to songwriting over the years. It's my pleasure tonight to call to the stage one more time, because he's been up here already, Michael Smith, writer and associate editor for The Drum Media and also bass player for the Atlantics, to present the In Memoriam section of our program. Michael Smith, ladies and gentlemen.
You'd think he would have done a bass riff, but that's another story. Okay, but, sadly, associate editor of the Drum Media, I've had to do a few of these in the last few years, and last year, obviously, we lost some fairly significant names, people like Lobby Lloyd and, Grant McLennan. This year, the people that have passed on aren't necessarily big names, but they were all contributors in their way to what really matters with this whole songwriting thing, which is to enhance our cultural legacy. I mean, that's ultimately, you hope that the songs that you write will not only touch people, but become significant in some part of their lives, whether it reminds them of their youth or the first romance or whatever. If you're really lucky, those songs will pass into the canon. These songwriters that passed on this year haven't necessarily done that, but they've all made a significant contribution in their own way. The first one to draw our attention to, and you'll have to forgive me, this is why I've taken the glasses off. As I've become older, the glasses come off as a short-sighted person, as against most people who, as they get older, their glasses go on. I shall read, to the best of my ability, about the following. Dean Turner. Now, okay, the younger members of the audience know Dean Turner, or knew Dean Turner. Born the 6th of January 1972, Dean Turner is probably best known for his work with the Melbourne indie rock four-piece Magic Dirt, which he formed in 1991 with his then partner Adelita Sren, with himself as the bass player. A dedicated and passionate musician, Turner wrote many of the band's most successful songs, including Watch Out Boys and Dirty Jeans. His uniquely sinuous and organic playing underpinning the Magic Dirt sound. Under the name Dean Dirt, Turner also produced a lot of recordings for a number of fellow Australian artists, including 2 albums for a band called the Red Sun Band, as well as records for Jersey, Sons of the Sun, and the debut solo album released earlier this year for Adelita, his former partner. He was committed to helping young bands develop and served on the Vic Rocks Grant Committee for several years. This is something that perhaps New South Wales should take a bit notice of, a grant system that allows for money to be donated to help develop struggling, emerging singer-songwriters, bands and that sort of thing. We do have Music New South Wales, but unfortunately not quite so proactive, inevitably because of the funding, as something like Vic Rocks. Anyway, he was also, towards the end of his life, the manager of a Brisbane band called Violent Soho. Turner lost his 9-year battle with an extremely rare form of soft tissue cancer on the 21st of August of this year, and he was aged just 37. Russell Dunlop, for the older members of the audience, you may well remember him. Born in Paddington, Russell Dunlop first caught the public's attention in 1968 as the drummer of Sydney pop group Aesop's Fables, who had broken up before the release of their only single, Little Yellow Pills, in February 1971. That, of course, didn't deter the young, ambitious Dunlop, who had already joined a jazz rock outfit called Mother Earth, which was fronted by a young lady named Renee Gayer. You may have heard of her. Band the band featured on her debut solo album. Even though it was a solo album, it was actually a Mother Earth album released in 1973. But the writing was on the wall for the band, and Dunlop quickly passed through the Levi Smith Clefs, Cool Bananas, which became the Auntie Jack Gong Band, and then on to Ayers Rock, with whom he toured the country twice with Georgie fame as part of the Aussie Blue Flames. Richard Clapton also called on him to play on his debut album Prussian Blue. This is as a drummer along the way. In the late 1970s, Dunlop began a career courtesy a highly successful career, a different kind of career, a successful collaboration with producer-engineer Bruce Brown at Albert Studios, and they formed their own production company, BAD, which of course stood for Brown and Dunlop. His credits as producer or co-producer included records by Machinations, Mental as Anything, who this year were inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame, John English, The Reels, Kevin Borich, The Hitmen, Dave Warner, Leon Berger, and Doug Ashton, among many. It was during this period that Dunlop finally got to shine as a songwriter with Brown, albeit with an unlikely novelty song, Space Invaders, back in 1980, inspired by the popular video game of the same name, which, curiously enough, has had something of a resurgence. Those analog games, people do love them. Now this is, I found this, Russell and Bruce released that under the pseudonym Player One. It seemed to have struck a chord, and this is a great quote, you'll love this, but as Dunlop recalled for journalist Pat Sheil, we sat down and wrote a bunch of space songs, but instead of sticking to the concept of the hit, we wandered off into the clever musical territory of fancy time signatures, radical chord progressions, and so on. The reply came back from the United States of America and the record company thereof that this was intended for 13 and 14-year-olds. You've lost us. And that was the end of, as Russell said at the time, that was the end of the Bruce Dunlop gravy train. So the trick is, don't be too clever. Unless, of course, you're signed to be clever, like a Yes or a Genesis or something like that, who even they had to eventually dumb down, as anybody who's bought a record post Peter Gabriel will know very well. The Dunlop continued to play live. The session work continued, although inevitably, because drum machines came in, good old drum machines, the studio session work for drummers tended to dry out towards the end of the 90s. He went on to work as a radio operator with a courier company for a decade before moving with his family to Lismore in 2007, where he set up a small studio and was working with some other old farts like Jim Kelly, fantastic guitar player from Crossfire, and more recently had worked as an ensemble coach at Southern Cross University. One of his last musical projects was producing and mixing the soundtrack for Rachel Ward's directorial feature film debut, Beautiful Kate. Sadly, Russell Dunlop died suddenly in May while playing drums at his son's wedding in, it's not something I'm sure they would want to remember him by. He was only 64.